The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
If you didn't watch the game and you see, 2-1 loss in overtime, well, they played them tough. They'll get them the next time. Everything is okay. No. You had to watch this to realize what a lopsided 2-1 overtime win it was for Carolina last night, and how concerned the Washington Capitals are as they head into Game 2 tomorrow night. We're going to play the entire news conference from Spencer Carberry, who doesn't usually snap at people, and he didn't snap last night, but his answers were one word. This is a guy who routinely gives 1 minute plus answers to questions. So he is clearly PO'd at what he saw on the ice last night at Capital One Arena. But the playoffs are all about adjustments, and we will see what kind of adjustments the Capitals make as we move on in this series. But it's Game 2 tomorrow night, and if they go down 0-2 at home, while home ice doesn't really seem to matter a whole lot in hockey, Carolina has been brilliant at home. And to go down 0-2 and then go to Carolina needing to win one of the two just to stay alive and winning both of them to even up the series and get home ice back, that's a tall order. We'll get to that coming up. Doc Emerick was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and love watching and listening to Joe Beninati and Craig Laughlin at this time of year. Unfortunately, the NHL doesn't allow the local teams to move on to round 2, so it's national people. And Sean McDonough is terrific. He was fine last night. I just missed the familiar sounds, but I really miss Doc Emerick. Doc Emerick doing hockey is as good as it ever was. I would say that if you had to rate the greatest national hockey announcer in history, everybody's got their hometown favorite, but the greatest national hockey guy probably is Doc Emerick, who's been retired for a few years now and is very much missed. We're going to do Orioles preview at 10:30. Kyle Gibson, who's back with the team after winning 15 games for the Orioles 2 years ago, spent last year in St. Louis, was a late signing in spring training, and got really rocked in his first start against the Yankees. A little bit better over the weekend against Kansas City, but still trying to find his footing as the Orioles are scuffling. They're in bad shape right now. They're the second worst team in the American League. And they got rocked again last night in Minnesota, losing 9-1. So all that's ahead. Anyway, this was, as I say, the entire news conference. I don't usually play full news conferences, but in this case, it's very easy to do because it's only 2 minutes and 43 seconds. Spencer Carberry, who routinely goes 20 minutes sometimes after games, in this instance was clearly not happy with what he saw on the ice and uncharacteristically short in his answers in describing the 2-1 overtime loss last night.
Spencer, you talked about how well you know this opponent. Is that exactly the kind of game you would have expected them to play this style?
Yeah.
Coach, are you at all surprised by the lack of success or just keeping it in the offensive zone, outshot 33-14?
From our standpoint of
Yeah.
our ability to get on their half? I mean, for sure. I thought we would be a lot better than that, than we were tonight. We'll regroup and we'll have to be better in Game 2.
Tom said he felt like you guys were just a little bit off all night. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, that's accurate.
We know it's a 7-game series. What do you tell your squad after a game like tonight? What's the message to them?
Well, we'll talk about the things that have to change for Game 2. And so there's a lot of X's and O's. There's a lot of physicality stuff. There's a lot of puck battle stuff. We'll narrow it down because you could obviously go down about 20 different avenues from tonight. So we'll narrow it down and give them a concrete plan of what needs to improve and how it needs to look. And then we'll get to work on it.
Did they just out-execute you guys tonight as far as breakouts and doing all the little things that go into winning a game?
Vogues, if we sat here and went through the whole game from breakout to getting through the neutral zone to forecheck to wall play, we could it wasn't good, and that's the bottom line. Our entire game was not good, and we'll, like I said, we'll regroup and we'll get ready for game 2.
Coach, can you at least talk about LT's play?
Thought he was fantastic.
Spencer, you mentioned a litany of issues, but the physicality one, I think going into OT, they out hit you 42-30. Was that a little surprising to you, being that you guys seemingly had that advantage coming into this series?
Well, you're chasing a lot, right? So that's even surprising because they had the puck so much. So usually when you don't have the puck, usually you're initiating contact to try to get it back. So, but like I said, establishing a forecheck is usually where you get most of your contact, and that was essentially non-existent. First 3, I just watched them. Just the first 4 shifts, we couldn't get on their half, and then so you're back on your heels. D-zone start, D-zone start, D-zone start, and they throw a puck to the net, goes in.
Yep, and that's really what it was all the action at the end of the Caps ice, and clearly he's angry. You just don't hear Spencer Carberry in a news conference say one-word answers, which he gave several times there. He was a little bit expansive on a couple of them, but he's going to let his team have it, and we'll see how they respond. And playoffs are all about adjustments. We see this every year, and they'll come out with a different game plan on Thursday night, but the game plan for Carolina worked perfectly, even though they were trailing late. I think with 10 minutes to go, Caps were still up 1-0, and they managed to tie the game. And then in overtime, and they tie the game on a really stupid turnover. I mean, it was really awful, and that tied the game. Then they go to overtime, and 3 minutes in, Jacob Slavin gets one past Logan Thompson, and kind of kind of sneaking it in through a bunch of bodies in front of the net. Traffic in front of the net is what we say this time of year. If we don't know much about hockey, we want to sound like we know what we're talking about. But that one snuck in, and that was what won the game. Alexei Protas was the only one who got on the board for the Caps, the only goal that they had, and he was the first to say that they didn't play well last night.
The way we played tonight, I don't think it was good enough to win. They were harder on pucks and battles and everything, and we got to be better on Thursday for sure.
Is it frustrating to not be able to keep it in the offensive zone?
Yes, it is. We know what team we are facing. That's they're a hard team. They're tough to play against, and but I think it started from us today. We weren't good enough in D zone breakouts, and as a result, couldn't connect to the O zone.
The 6 days off, did that have any impact on this game?
No, everyone in the same position. There's they had maybe like one more day, so there's like no excuses for both of us and for us especially, and we got to be better.
What would you see on the
goal? I felt like it didn't go. It was not going our way. Needed like to take a shot or something, and found a good spot, and luckily it went in, and but I would take a win for sure.
What's the message to the guys after a loss like this?
That's the only first game that's going to be a long series, and we have a second game on Thursday, and like I said, we got to be ready. It's only start. Frustrating, but we know we got better, and that's good news, and we will be better.
That would be the upside if it's a long series. They got to win. Got to win tomorrow night. Being down 0-2. Teams come back from 0-2. It happens, and they could lose the first 2 at home and still win the series. But things have got to change for Game 2 tomorrow night. I will get back to more on this coming up, but I thought this was fun to listen to yesterday. Adam Peters was on the Pat McAfee show, and minimal cussing, I would say, from McAfee, sometimes more respectful to his guests. Not a big fan of the show, but you don't often hear Peters in a long-form interview situation. He does news conferences a few times a year. I guess he's available for reporters to talk to on and off the record, that sort of thing. But, not a guy who does a lot of interviews. So I pulled a few things from his conversation. They went a long time with him, went close to half an hour with Peters yesterday. And this is a question that everybody has asked in the offseason. Geez, when did you know that you'd really struck gold with the number 2 pick and that Jaden Daniels would be this good?
I think it was just a process of everything from the moment he got in here, the moment we flew him in for interviewing from after we drafted him, and he wanted to go through the playbook while he was here, and he was doing like dropbacks on the plane back to flying back to LA, and just every step of the way you could see the humility that he had, the work ethic that he had, just the way he connected with his teammates out. The fields are right over here, like out on the grass, and the way he went about everything. He earned everything he had, and so it was just kind of a step-by-step process, but you could feel it right away what a special person he was.
Okay, in the first round this year draft, you go with a big guy out of Oregon, offensive tackle Josh Connerly Jr. There was a letter from Cliff Kingsbury that you showcased on draft night that he showed up and said, hey, take the big guy from Oregon, okay? We need to protect him. You couple that alongside a trade that you make this offseason with Tunsil. Felt like, was this a focal point for you? We need to solidify the people in front of our superstar, Jaden Daniels, or was this a situation where you couldn't believe he was available?
I think it was both, really. I think in the offseason when we had the opportunity to get Tunsil, which it doesn't come around that often to get a blue chip left tackle, one of the best left tackles in the league. So we felt that was an opportunity that we didn't want to pass up, and for the reasons you're talking about. Like, we want to protect Jaden, and really he's the cornerstone of our franchise. We want to make sure we're protecting him. And then so we got that done, and then we really wanted Connerly. And that letter was cool because Cliff, he's a tireless worker. It's unbelievable how much he works. And as he's doing draft prep, he's also watching college teams for different plays and different scheme and just different things he can learn from them so he can implement into what we do. And he watched a lot of Oregon. So he said, I watched every single snap of Oregon. And he usually just watches the skill guys, the quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends, running backs. And so he left that note on my desk. He came by to say what's up, and just wrote that down and left it on my desk. I was like, all right, well, if Cliff wants this guy, then I'm good.
How about Josh Connerly, no matter what, draft day seemingly from Cliff Kingsbury to you? I thought there was a chance he wrote 30 different letters, though, just in case. Hey, make sure this, make sure this, make sure this, so you would have a letter for it. I appreciate the fact that it's all hands on deck over there, and it feels like your culture is a great one. Were you worried that Cliff was going to leave, or did you know that Cliff had it good right now, and maybe another year with Jaden in that offense could be something special under Dan Quinn, as opposed to taking on all the challenges of becoming a head coach again? Feel like a lot of people wanted Cliff to be their head coach this offseason.
Yeah, and rightfully so. He's a great coach and he's a great person. But I think what's cool about here is what the culture DQ has created, where people want to be here, people want to stay here. They're having fun working, they're having fun playing. So it makes it an easy decision. If it's not your perfect role that you want to move up to, whether it's head coach or something else, you have a great home here. And really that's how I felt when I was in San Francisco under John Lynch, where I really loved being there. But if there was the great opportunity came like it did with Washington, then I could take it. But if not, then I'm really, really happy here. And that's the culture that DQ's created within the staff here.
Some more from Adam Peters on the Pat McAfee show yesterday. And, he talked about John Lynch, who he worked for in San Francisco. Now they're colleagues. Now they're making deals with one another. And this is how he explains how the Deebo Samuel trade came together.
Yeah, that was really cool. It was actually at the Combine. I was hanging out with Lynch at lunch, and we started talking about it. And, obviously there's a lot of talks that go into it. But knowing Deebo from when we drafted him to just the competitor that he is on the field, he's one of the best competitors on the field I've ever seen in my life. And just he can put a team on his back and will you to win. So understanding what type of person he was, understanding that I worked with John, and he's going to be awesome to deal with, and then understanding our offense, which is getting the ball out of Jaden's hands quickly, and he's really good at that, and getting the ball in space and moving fast. That's going to present a lot of problems for defenses.
Yeah, they've been lacking that. So somebody opposite Terry McLaurin, who they really have to pay attention to, also a guy who can run the ball. They'll run him out of the backfield. I think Cliff Kingsbury will find a multitude of ways to use Deebo Samuel, and this is more of, okay, we got a quarterback who's really good on a rookie deal. Let's take advantage of it. Let's trade some draft picks and bring in veterans, and Deebo Samuel is going to be one of them. This is about the last week, the crazy week that we've had here with the stadium announcement and the announcement the other day about the draft being held here.
I can't even put into words. Just being a part of that, being at when we announced the RFK and being in the audience there, being able to be a part of that and being around John Riggins, Doug Williams, Darryl Green. I mean, just all the greats here, Joe Gibbs, and it was just fantastic to be there. And just like I had to step back and really think about it. And I thank Josh. I was like, gosh, this is why I came here for things like this. And then announcing the draft here, which will be awesome. I won't be able to participate in it at all because I'll just be right here, which kind of sucks. But it'll be really cool for the whole DMV and just our nation's capital as the epicenter of football. I think there's nothing better than that.
Last thing from Adam Peters on the Pat McAfee show, and it's about Dan Quinn. And I have to look back on the hiring of Dan Quinn and say, boy, I had that wrong. Like, we were thinking Ben Johnson. Oh, yeah, Ben Johnson from Detroit. And Ben Johnson had such little interest that as the owners were flying there to talk to him, he put out a tweet, said, yeah, I'm staying in Detroit. So it seemed like Dan Quinn was a consolation prize. Having seen how everything played out here last year, I think they made a hell of a choice there. Could someone have done better? I don't think so. You take a 4-win team and you take them to the NFC Championship game, Dan Quinn gets a lot of credit for that. Peters gets a lot of credit for hiring him. Here's Peters on that.
When we went through the hiring process, I knew a lot about DQ from Kyle and everybody on Kyle's staff because they came from Atlanta. So understanding the type of person that he was, the type of human being that he was, and then in the interview process, seeing he had done everything once and how prepared he was for the next role and how ready he was for his next chance. And so those things made us all really excited about him as a head coach. And then the way he connects with our players, the way he connects with our coaches, the way he develops players and coaches, and the plan that he has, authenticity that he has. Like free agency last year, he made it easy for us because everybody wanted to come play here. And it wasn't because of me. It wasn't because of the AstroTurf. It was because of DQ. And so he made our jobs easy. Players from all around the league, either who played for him or heard about him, understood what type of person he was, what type of coach he was. And, that really, really was a big deal in getting all the guys that we got in last year because, as you guys said, this wasn't a destination. And so people had to really, kind of take a chance on us, and they did because of DQ, and it's been fantastic.
If you're a little confused by that reference to AstroTurf, here's what's behind that, because they had asked about this earlier, and it's a story about Peters and when he was hired very early in 2024. There was still some snow on the ground, and he looked out the window at the park there in Ashburn, and he saw a partially covered AstroTurf field. And he said in horror, "What's that?" And they said, well, it's AstroTurf. We haven't taken it out. I think Quinn was and still is under the misconception that they used to practice on that. See, the new Redskin Park, the old one was closer to Dulles Airport. The one that's in Ashburn now, that was built in 1992. That was built right after the Redskins won their last Super Bowl. And at the time, you still had Veterans Stadium, which had artificial turf. I believe Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh had artificial turf. Riverfront in Cincinnati, they had artificial turf. So there are a few, maybe even more than that, stadiums that had that type of surface. So they practice on it. Well, by the time we got to about 2000, and I was out there almost every day in that training camp of 2000, the year that they went for it with Dion and Bruce Smith and all that hoopla about, how much money they spent and all the free agents they brought in for a team that won the division. They thought they were going to win the Super Bowl with Danny's checkbook. They had stopped using it by then because stadiums didn't use it. They'd gone to this field turf where they have ground up automobile tires. So it was always used for media setups. It was used for when they would have training camp. That was a place that the fans could walk and not ruin the grass. So I think that he needs to be a little bit more educated about the artificial turf. And the reason it was still there was Dan Snyder was too cheap to take it out. I think it cost well over $1 million just to remove it. And that's why he didn't do it. But as far as players practicing on that, that wasn't the case. But anyway, interesting stuff from Adam Peters yesterday on the McAfee show. Coming up, Doc Emerick, the greatest, in my mind, hockey announcer, certainly national, who did Stanley Cup finals and playoffs for 40 years on NBC and maybe on other networks as well. USA had it for a while. He is, to me, the greatest voice of hockey, and he was on yesterday with Dan Patrick talking about his career and interesting comparison between Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby. That's next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Before we get to Doc Emerick and some great hockey stories, this may not be on your radar from last night. You probably know by now that Golden State opened up its series with Minnesota by winning. Steph Curry injured his hamstring, played only 13 minutes, and his future in the series is in doubt. But, guys make miraculous recoveries, so you never know. But as this game started, Buddy Hield, who had a great game in the Game 7 elimination of Houston, he had 33 points. Buddy Hield came out for Game 1 wearing the wrong shorts. The Warriors had to call a timeout, were issued a delay of game as Hield went to the locker room and put on the correct shorts. Now, he's not the only one that's made this mistake. LeBron James, Michael Beasley, among others. And the way these uniforms change all the time, alt uniforms, sometimes you turn on a game, you have no idea who's playing because these are colors that are not familiar to you with the team. We always knew the Celtics were in green. Yeah, sometimes they're in green, sometimes they're in black. Sometimes even worse, like you'll tune in a game and you'll see a team in a color that's not even part of their color scheme. It's just, I guess, marketing and more stuff they can sell on Fanatics and stuff like that. It was actually Minnesota that noticed he was wearing the wrong shorts. And 59 seconds into the game, he actually played. So he played a little bit. Score tied at 2. He had to go to the locker room and change his shorts. But all's well that ends well. Warriors won the game. It reminded me of something that I remember from very early in my career. I was working in San Antonio. And in the 1979 draft, the San Antonio Spurs, picking 19th, took Wiley Peck, who was a forward out of Mississippi State. Very nice kid, very soft-spoken, probably overwhelmed by the NBA because he lasted only 1 year, played about 12 minutes a game, 3.5 points, 3.5 rebounds a game. He was picked up by Dallas in the expansion draft, and we never heard from him again, except for he is known for this by many who were on press row that night. In those days, the Spurs had shorts that on the backs resembled like chaps, like a cowboy would wear leather chaps over his jeans. And so it had the outline in the rear end of what the chaps would look like. Well, Wiley Peck gets put in the game. I think Doug Moe was the coach, and they put Wiley Peck in the game. He rips off his warm-up pants, and what do you know? Wiley Peck's shorts are on backwards, which kind of summed up his career. I hope he's doing well these days. Again, a very nice guy, but the NBA was just not for him. All right, Doc Emerick retired for, I think, at least 2 years, maybe 3, the way time flies. Who knows? But always look forward to Doc Emerick doing the Stanley Cup playoffs, particularly when the Capitals were in it. I think he must have done when the Capitals won the Cup in 2018. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he was doing it. But he was on yesterday with Dan Patrick and talked about when he knew it was time to hang it up.
In anything where you have a motor skill, which is in athletics as well, you like to make your move before somebody makes it for you. And fortunately, with NBC, the hook was not out, but I had 50 years covering the sport, and I'd had 40 years at the NHL. And I think one thing, too, that COVID did was just before we took the break in February of 2020, the league came out with rules that were very necessary, where we couldn't have anyone between the benches, where we had to be 6 feet with a boom mic away from all the coaches and the players. We could not go into the dressing rooms anymore. And that was where the fun was for me, in addition to preparing and doing the games, was actually being able to learn something more about the players that I could share with somebody. And so all of those things sort of came to the fore at once. The numbers of 40 and 50 were kind of round numbers that were even, and it seemed like a good time. I had so many great memories that it was a great time to be out.
I was going to ask you, what's the first thing to go in a play-by-play person? And it sounds like your eyesight was the first thing to go.
Yeah, I think that would be probably true. You and I were together in London at the Olympics in 2012. And the one thing that happened there was that I discovered, to my chagrin, when I was doing water polo, that I had cataracts. And so those were removed, and my eyesight, of course, immediately got better. But you realize that those are things that happen with age. But I don't know that my eyesight was going, but you realize that that does happen as you get older. But I think the thing with me was that the travel was starting to get to me, and I wanted to be home more. And all of those things added up to make for the right decision. And to get to watch these games now, and especially the finishes that we had in the game sevens, were, to come from behind third periods in the game sevens, as well as the come from behind almost tie last night in Toronto. Those are exciting. And I do envy the guys that are doing the games now, but I wouldn't want to be there. They are having the time of their lives doing these games, and I'm glad for them.
Talking to Doc Emerick, member of the NHL and Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. If I would have talked to you 20 years ago and I would have said to you, Gretzky's goal-scoring record is not safe, you would have said what?
You're wrong. I would have said, I would have said I agree with you that it's. I would have said it's safe. But then we had Wayne Gretzky on at the All-Star game in St. Louis 5 years ago. And he was asked the question, can Ovechkin catch you? And he said, yes. And here's why. He's on a good team that wins a lot of games, and he's healthy. He rarely gets hurt. This year he did, but to his credit, he came back a bulldozer, and he wound up eclipsing the record in a marvelous ceremony that the NHL had on Long Island. But the other thing is, too, the one thing that is often overlooked, he came into the league a bull in a china shop, and he would hammer players. He was often the league leader in hits, and he was again this year. He never stopped playing his game, and yet he was the greatest goal scorer of the modern era, and now is the record goal scorer of all time. And a guy that came in, I'll never forget the first time that we ever had him on our telecast in New Jersey. Of course, we wanted to interview Alex Ovechkin. And so he came in and politely sat down, and we had a technical difficulty on MSG Network. And we said, Alex, we're sorry, we can't do the interview. He said, no, you don't understand. I want to do the interview. And we told him, no, we can't. We've got a technical problem in the truck. We can't do it. And so he got up and left. But he really wanted to do everything the right way when he first came here.
If I said you can start your team with Ovechkin or Crosby?
I want them both, because I want the playmaker and I want the goal scorer.
It doesn't work that way, Doc.
Okay, Crosby. And here's why. Because you do need goal scorers, I understand that, but Sid is the guy who is always going to be prepared to play, first on, last off, is always going to be a playmaker and a guy that will lead by example. And that's not to say that Alex as captain does not. We saw what he did with Marc-Andre Fleury, and they were arch rivals, of course, for a long time. He has led by example, too. But here's a story that showed what Alex has grown into, and it would make that on the total of years, Sid has done this in Pittsburgh, but Alex has picked up that slack in the later years in Washington. I was talking with Barry Trotz before what turned out to be the last game that Washington would play before they won the Stanley Cup championship. And I said, can you retell a story that you told me earlier in the year about Ovechkin? And so he did. And so I did tell this at the end of the playoffs when Washington was winning the Stanley Cup. It was that summer before, and the Capitals had disappointed again. And Alex was getting married, and Barry was invited. And so he went over to Moscow and attended the wedding. He was invited to the reception, and Barry said, I'm not going to go to the reception with a bunch of my hockey players. I'll wait. So he had dinner with Alex shortly thereafter. And he said, Alex, I've got to talk to you seriously about what's coming ahead. There is a lot of unhappiness in Washington. And there are people who think it's your fault. And there are people who think that it's the fault of some of your teammates. And there is going to be change. You are going to have to train like you never trained before. You are going to have to be the first guy on the ice. And you are going to have to be this team's leader. It's not pleasant to think about, but that's what's ahead. That fall, he came in and scored 7 goals in the first 2 games. And even though Washington fell behind in their playoff series, they were rallied and went ahead, and they went on and won the Stanley Cup. And he's been the great leader ever since. But Sid has been doing that ever since he came to Pittsburgh. And so when you force me into that corner and the paint is still not dried, I choose Sid.
Okay. And Sid will probably win more rings, but a very good story about Alex Ovechkin if you've not heard that before. And there was a lot of talk about that when they won the Cup, that Barry Trotz, in what was his final year with the Caps, went out to see Alex Ovechkin. And it's like, okay, now's the time. You've got to step up. You got to be in better shape. And he was. And they went on to win the Cup. Ovechkin famously saying before the season started, "We're not going to suck," and then added an expletive to it the following year when they were looking to repeat. I guess the postscript to that is, unfortunately, Barry Trotz didn't have a chance to repeat, and it was over money that he was due a bonus of, I think it wasn't much. It was like $300,000 or something like that. And Ted didn't want to, renegotiate the contract and give him a new contract. However it worked, he wound up going to the Islanders, and Capitals have not gotten past the first round since then. It's amazing that Alex Ovechkin has never advanced past the second round of the playoffs except for once, and that was in 2018 when they won the Cup. Last thing from Emerick, who was, and I think if he stepped behind a microphone, would still be the greatest ever to do it. But the names that he had to deal with, and so many of the Russian players that have come into the league, and Sweden and other foreign countries, which are tough names. My friend Steve Buckhantz, when he was doing the Bullets and the Wizards, went out of his way to get the correct pronunciation of every player's name. That's what professionals do. And Doc was asked what was the toughest name that he had to deal with during his career, long career, doing hockey.
Sergei Nemchinov, and it sure shouldn't have. I was working with Bill Clement, and we were doing, and I kept saying Nemchinov with an M. And he said, say Nemnov, Nemnov, Nemnov. You can do it, can't you? And I said, yeah, I can. And it came down to where if I said that over and over again before the game, that it came out more right than wrong. But it's an imperfect science, isn't it? I mean, you guys have to talk 3 hours in the morning, and it's not totally perfect, I suppose. But I never did a perfect game. I mean, you talk over and over all the time, and you do make mistakes, that's for sure.
Well, you may not have done a perfect game, but you were, in my mind, as good as it got for hockey and maybe all sports. And as a matter of fact, one year in the Olympics, Al Michaels was asked to do a hockey game to kind of celebrate the Miracle on Ice from 1980. And he said, hell no. He said, I'm not going to be nearly as good as Doc Emerick. Doc Emerick's the best to do it. He's going to do it. And as he mentioned with Dan, he did do Olympic Games, and I was great at that as well. All right, coming up We'll talk more about the Capitals' loss last night, reaction from Tom Wilson on that. Also, Kyle Gibson, Orioles pitcher, will join us at 10:30 as we do Orioles preview every Wednesday. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So it is getting late, or maybe late early for the Orioles. Messed that one up, and so have the Orioles messed up their season so far. They're the second worst team in the American League. And it's not getting any better as they lost last night to the Twins 9-1. We do Orioles preview every Wednesday. We'll talk to Kyle Gibson, who has made 2 starts this year for the Orioles and has struggled. Also, Mike Elias trying to calm people down, play some of his news conference from the other day. We'll get to that. Capitals lost last night, 2-1 in overtime, and it's considered by the coaching staff and the players as a crushing loss, a loss that they were really blown out of. The score doesn't indicate what type of game it was. And when you're outshot 37-14, that should tell you something. And if you watch the game, you saw the Carolina Hurricanes, I want to say Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes on the Capitals' end of the ice just about the entire game. So a very angry Spencer Carberry after the game, not yelling, but giving one-word answers at his news conference. We played that earlier. And Tom Wilson, who is always good with the media, is looking at what happened last night as, just a mess of a performance.
It seemed like we were just a little bit off the whole night. Like we had a couple really good looks, couple bars, a couple chances we're getting in behind their D, and it's just not on the tape or whatever. So a little bit of execution, I think, can help us generate a little bit more control and help us put those pucks in the back of the net.
That's what you got to do. If you don't know much about hockey, that's all you got to say. You got to put the puck in the net, and that's what they did only once last night. Alexi Protas scored, and they actually had a lead with about 10 minutes to go if they could have preserved it. But you just can't ask Logan Thompson to keep making those stops. I mean, he's the one that kept him in the game with stop after stop after stop. If they didn't have him, that's like a 4-1 type of game. That's really what it would have been. As for the preparation for Game 2 tomorrow night, here's more from Wilson.
There's enough experience in this group. It's one game. I don't think anyone expected the playoffs just to be a straight line of ups. There's going to be ups and downs, and the next game is the biggest game.
Yeah, and what they can do. You say you can make adjustments to Dylan Strome. What kind of adjustments can you make?
I know there's some things we can talk about and figure it out. I don't think it's one glaring thing, but they were pressuring us all over the ice. We got to find a way to break it. I feel like we didn't play our style of hockey tonight. We kind of let them dictate the game, and they're a good team when you let them do that.
Were you surprised how difficult it was just to generate offense?
No, we had some great looks in the power play on that first one. But yeah, 5-on-5, we weren't good enough. I don't know what the shots were, but they definitely weren't pretty for us 5-on-5. So got to find a way to break their pressure. I think we will, and we'll be back ready next game.
Back in the lab today, adjustments, and Game 2 coming up tomorrow. They will play Game 3 in Carolina on Saturday, and then Game 4 on Monday before, if Capitals can win a game, bring the series back here. All right, the stadium stuff. And you're hearing a lot of things, reading a lot of things. Still, it's not a done deal. It's a deal in principle, but it has to be approved by the city council. Eric Flack of Channel 4 has done some really good reporting on this, and he put up a chart last night showing that there are 4 yeses on this, and I think 5 maybes, something like that. Phil Mendelson, the city council chairman who has been against this, came out the other day and he said, I expect something will go forward. He said he anticipates the council will make changes to the deal. Perhaps the central political question that is facing lawmakers, the mayor, the team, and the NFL is how significant those changes will be, according to what I'm reading here in the Washington Post. Roger Goodell is in on this. I don't know, because I don't know what happened with other stadiums and issues in other towns, but he's all in on this. He's part of a lobbying effort that went on Monday with Josh Harris at the Wilson Building, and they privately met with Phil Mendelson and talked to all but one of the council members. So they're schmoozing, they're arm twisting, all the things that go into making a deal. And look, it's not the first rodeo for Josh Harris and Mitch Rales and Mark Ein and the ownership of the team. They make deals. That's why they're billionaires. They know how to make deals, and they know that the first thing that goes on the table is not necessarily what you come up with in a finished deal. So there's a lot of things that have to go into this. Goodell stressed his D.C. ties, noting to several council members that he attended John Eaton Elementary in Cleveland Park, and described his upbringing in D.C. as a relic of a time when members of Congress used to live here and raise their families here. That's true. Most of them live in the states they represent and either have an apartment here. Some of them even stay in their offices. They shower at the gym. So there's that. Mendelson met with Goodell and Harris, and his conversation he described as very cordial and positive. It was not a negotiation, he said, and I'm sure it's way early for that. They have until July 15th, and they can extend the deadline after that, which probably will happen. Mendelson noted that council members have yet to see fully details of the deal and have only seen the term sheet and slides that Bowser's team made public during last month's announcement. So, last week is when they, a week ago, Monday, is when they announced it. I did see Mendelson in the Channel 9 report last night say that, the Nationals pay $6 million a year for rent at Nats Park, and this agreement calls for the football team to pay only $1 a year in rent. I would add that stadium was built for the team before it was owned by the Lerners. It was owned by Major League Baseball at the time and funded mainly by the city. It was about a $600 million deal when it started. It may have been pared down a little bit lower than that, maybe in the fives or something like that. So they're paying rent on that and should, because it's really owned by the city. It's not owned by the team. In this case, it's a nearly $4 billion stadium with the team kicking in, as the terms are outlined here, $2.7 billion, and paying for cost overruns, which I'm sure there will be, and who knows how long these tariffs are going to last, but that's going to add to it as well. So, yes, the deal for the city to pay $1 billion for this is probably not sitting well with some of the city council members and for their constituents and so forth, but, deals take time. These deals like this, you don't just slap it on the table and say, here it is, sign here. They have to be negotiated, and the schmoozing that's going on with the city council is not something that shouldn't be expected. Let me move on to this. Gilbert Arenas is part of a new documentary that's coming out, or is either out on Netflix. I haven't checked it yet, but it's called Shooting Guards, and it's about one of the worst incidents we've ever had here involving sports teams in Washington. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but it was really a disgusting event, and it destroyed the team for quite a while. This was 2009. It was right after Abe Pollin had passed away, or maybe about that time. And there was a spat over a card game that had taken place on a team plane between Gilbert Arenas, who was the big star of the team, and Javaris Crittenton, who was a guard, who was on his way out of the league. And some of it related to what happened, but more so he just wasn't that good. He was a first-round draft pick by the Lakers, wound up here a year later with the Wizards, and wasn't that great of a player to begin with, and then, just destroyed everything with what happened. So there was this dispute over the card game, and they decided, the two of them, they were going to settle this by bringing guns into the locker room. A really smart idea. These are grown men making millions of dollars a year, and they're going to bring guns in the locker room to settle this. And we know that, I don't know if Crittenton must have been suspended too, because I think that ended his run with the Wizards, and Gilbert was suspended for the rest of the year. He came back briefly, played in Orlando, played someplace else, Memphis maybe, and was out of the league in his early 30s, maybe 31, 32, something like that. So here is the trailer for the Netflix documentary, which is appropriately titled Shooting Guards.
You're an NBA player at 19 and you have nothing but idle time. Pocket full of money, you can do whatever you want.
There's always this line between being a prankster and going too far. And I was always on that line. It's dangerous in there.
They said, don't get caught up in Gilbert Arenas' antics, but he made his threats to my life. Say something off the wall, you keep talking about fighting, I play with guns.
Our decisions that day ruined his life.
When I get to the locker room, there's guns on my seat.
You said you was gonna shoot me, so I gave you guns. He said, what I need you for? I got mine.
People are screaming, running out. Life is about choices, but I feel like I'm losing control.
That locker room situation put him on a road that he was not wanting to be on.
Atlanta police have issued a murder warrant for former Washington Wizards player Javaris Crittenton.
All I know how to do is be honest, so we're gonna cut the bull right now.
So there you go. Shooting Guards on Netflix. Gilbert Arenas, Javaris Crittenton. I'll get to the postscript on Crittenton, who, as you heard there, was arrested, charged with murder, and that was pleaded down to what wound up being an 8-year jail sentence. But we'll get to actually 10. He only served 8. But this was Gilbert yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show to kind of promote the documentary and also, I thought, lighten up what turned out to be just an awful, ugly incident for Gilbert and for the team.
That's a great title. I'm not even gonna lie, just for everything that went on. But at first I wanted to tell this story to get the real story out there. But I never wanted to tell it without Javaris' side.
Okay, explain this to our audience just so they know what you're talking about.
So me and Javaris, which was my, rook at the time or second-year player, but he was, one of my guys on the team. We was playing a card game, and I didn't like the way he was conversating after losing. He was losing, so I didn't like the tone that he was saying to the other players. So as a veteran, as the guy that he looks up to, I checked him. And, when you're losing money, I'm checking you in front of players that got into a little altercation. And, we challenged each other. So the challenge was, you're going to shoot me? Well, I want to see you do it. I was calling this bluff. And it wasn't as drama-filled as, the media made it seem, right? It calmed down very quickly. But
you guys got guns at the card game?
No.
Okay.
This was in the locker room. The card game was on a plane from Arizona to Washington.
Okay.
That long flight, and they play cards on the game. So
how much money are we talking about here?
The pot at the time when I joined was probably $1,100.
Oh.
But I think he was down about $6,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you guys land, how are you guys when you get off the plane, and then when do you know that maybe this is escalating?
I'm an antagonizer. So, my personality, as you can see, I'm an antagonizer. I'm going to point. I'm going to poke at you. So, him losing, I'm poking at the end of the plane, just poking his buttons. But we did have a day off. So I think we landed Saturday. We did have Sunday off. And this happened Monday, where I'm still, I want to see if you're still going to be about your word. So I had the guns on his chair, and I wrote a note, pick one, to see, hey, pick one of these nice guns to shoot me with. But I knew he couldn't shoot me because there was no bullets for the gun, right? And then you had to go to Maryland to actually buy bullets, and the chances of them having a Desert Eagle 50 cal bullet or whatever he picked wasn't going to be there. So I wasn't really scared for my life. It was more, I'm going to call your bluff. Let's see what you're going to do. It was one of those type of ordeals, egotistic stuff that locker rooms go through.
I don't know.
On another level.
I don't know if this happened with other teams where guys are bringing in guns there, but
no. The other teams, they just get in fights. Yeah. Just so it was very immature on, especially my part. Being the older player on a team. Very immature. But I did it. I really tried to correct my wrong as soon as it happened by, really taking the blame for it and trying to see if the media just focus on me and get away from him.
When did you know that it was going to be a bigger story than just a locker room prank?
When Peter Vesey got a hold of it and he wrote the article, OK Corral, inside the Wizard locker room. I was like, oh, shit. right. So it was, because before that, it happened on like the 21st. So for the most part, the Washington, Wilbon and Kornheiser, they wasn't touching the story, even though they heard rumbles of it, right? It was like, okay, it's contained. Okay, let's just go on about our business. Let's not try that again. And, once he leaked the story, it was all hell broke loose after that.
Well, not exactly. That's Gilbert and Dan, I think, laughing it up a little bit too much about that. There really wasn't anything funny about that. And some of the other players who were in the locker room, they didn't know the guns didn't have bullets. They were scared. They ran out of the locker room. I hope that's covered in the documentary. That was bad stuff. And he leaves out a couple of other parts here. One of them is, well, first, Tony wasn't writing columns then. Wilbon, I think, still was, but I don't, they're not reporters. They were not at that point in their careers investigative reporters. Peter Vesey, to some extent, was, but more kind of like a gossip columnist around the league and knows everybody, even though he's been retired, still is in touch with a lot of people in the NBA. And the word got to him, and he reported it accurately. And so it sat for a while, even after it was reported that they had brought the guns in the locker room. But Gilbert, who, okay, he's saying now I was immature, I didn't handle this right. Well, he was an idiot with what happened next, because they play a game in Philadelphia a couple days later, and they do the pregame introductions, and Gilbert comes out with his fingers like they're six-shooters. Ha, 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 guns, ha, ha. No, not funny. Not funny whatsoever. And David Stern, who was the commissioner at the time, the late, great David Stern. Adam Silver, I think, has turned over too much of the league to the players. I think he's a little soft on things, and even the way he handled Ja Morant, especially this last incident, was not good. And David Stern was no nonsense, and he suspended Gilbert for the rest of the year. I think he even spent some time like in a halfway house because of this on some pretty serious charges. He could have gone to jail. And that was really an awful, awful thing, and it's nothing to laugh about. And as far as what happened to Javaris Crittenton after that, he was suspended for the rest of the season as well, released, wound up playing like a year in Japan. And then in August of 2011, he was charged with the August 19th murder of Julian Jones, or Jillian, maybe Julian or Jillian, 22-year-old mother of four. She was not the intended target. It's believed that Crittenton was targeting a person who robbed him in April of 2011. The woman was shot in the leg, died during surgery. He was later arrested at the airport in California, Orange County, California, in late August, getting ready to get on a flight to Atlanta. His lawyer said, oh, yeah, he was going there to surrender himself, whatever. He was sent to Atlanta to stand trial. After his arrest, he denied any involvement. He denied it completely at the time, was released on $230,000 bond. He and his cousin, Douglas Gamble, were officially indicted April 2nd of 2013. So he was arrested in 2011. He wasn't officially indicted until April of 2013 on 12 counts in connection with the woman's death, including charges of murder, felony murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, giving false statements, attempted murder, and participation in criminal street gang activity. Oh, yeah, says here in the story that Crittenton reportedly joined the Crips after signing with the Lakers. He was a first-round draft pick, and he signed with the Crips while he was playing with the Lakers, according to this report. While out on bond on the murder charges, remember he's arrested in 2011, released on $230,000 bond, Crittenton was arrested in pursuant to a January 10th, 2014 indictment of him and 13 other people who were accused of selling multi-kilo quantities of cocaine and several hundred pounds of marijuana. That's some pretty serious drug stuff. Finally, April 29, 2015, shortly before the trial was set to begin, he pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter with a weapon and aggravated assault with a firearm, was sentenced to 23 years in jail. That was later reduced to 10, and he wound up serving, 8 because he was released in April of 2023, so 2 years ago. And he's a part of this documentary, Shooting Guards. But a little disappointed and Dan Patrick, who I'm a big fan of, kind of jovially laughing it up with Gilbert Arenas about what was just an awful event and destroyed the team for a long time. That was a team that had Antoine Jameson, they had Caron Butler. They had some players, and I don't think they were capable of making the finals, but they could have made a nice run in the playoffs, and they could have transitioned with younger players. Instead, the team hits rock bottom. John Wall comes along as the number one draft pick, and they start to rebuild a little bit with Bradley Beal, and they became a pretty good team again for a while. But there's nothing funny about what Gilbert Arenas did, and to lighten it up by hardy har, and we knew we didn't have any bullets and blah, 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 blah. No, nothing good about that. This is interesting. Football, not so much that the Cowboys are trading for a receiver. It's like they got the quarterback making $65 million a year. You got to have some receivers. So they are in a deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers to get wide receiver George Pickens, who's in the final year of his rookie deal. And looks like they couldn't come to an agreement on an extension in Pittsburgh. So they want to team him with CeeDee Lamb. He's young. He's 24 years old, 59 catches for 900 yards, 3 touchdowns last year. Missed 3 games because of a hamstring strain and had a number of incidents on the field, which I guess Mike Tomlin doesn't necessarily want to put up with unless your name is Antonio Brown. He was flagged twice for unsportsmanlike conduct in a Week 13 win against the Bengals. A week earlier, he was involved in a scuffle with Browns cornerback Greg Newsome during a Hail Mary attempt, and that's when Mike Tomlin says he's got to grow up. And so I guess he felt like he didn't grow up enough and is shipping him out to the Dallas Cowboys. It brings up the question, well, what happens with Aaron Rodgers? I mean, if you're bringing Aaron Rodgers into Pittsburgh, don't you want him to have receivers? Don't you want him to have George Pickens? Or, is he bringing Devontae Adams in again? I don't know. But that to me is an interesting part of this. And then we have this guy in Colorado. He's unnamed. In the lawsuit, he goes by John Doe. But the person identified as John Doe is suing the NFL for, get this, $100 million in punitive damage for the harm caused and the impact of the NFL's action on his emotional well-being while he watched Shedeur Sanders slip down the draft board to number 144. He says, John Doe, in the lawsuit, says he followed Sanders over the last 2 seasons. He claims the reports and leaked statements suggesting that Sanders tanked the interviews, wasn't prepared, and was too cocky, helped create a narrative that unjustly harmed his reputation. These slanderous statements caused emotional distress to John Doe as a fan, as a consumer. The claims against the NFL, violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which would be collusion among NFL teams not to draft into the 5th round, violation of the Civil Rights Act, intentional infliction of emotional distress and trauma, and violations of consumer protection laws. Good luck in court with this. Good luck in court with that. That is probably going to get a good laugh out of the judge who gets that story. And one more from college football, and it reminds me of a story that my late friend John Feinstein, who just passed away recently, loved to tell, and it was a quote from Jerry Tarkanian. And Tarkanian, who was, kind of one step ahead of the law when he was coaching at UNLV and eventually got popped and wound up in the NBA for a while and I think back in college basketball. But he was a renegade, okay? So Tark said, oh, looks like they caught Kentucky. Well, Cleveland State is going to go on probation. So as all this stuff floats in college football, and there's still the investigation of the spying that went on at Michigan, and some talk that they're going to take away their title that they won a couple of years ago. Who knows? But Akron has been told, no bowl games this year. Why? Low academic progress rate. Yeah, the NCAA, at least for Akron, has decided that they're going to crack down on the academic progress rate, which measures term-by-term eligibility rates with programs whose APR fall under 930 under certain sanctions. I don't know what these numbers mean, but a low APR in 2022, 3 years ago, cost them practice time, and a lower one in 2023, which is the punishment for this one, will cost them a bowl game. Whoa! The last time Akron played in a bowl game, 2017, 8 years ago, they lost 50-3 to Florida Atlantic in the Boca Raton Bowl. So, all right, Players getting paid big money, millions of dollars, switching schools whenever they want to, playing with the ability to take a redshirt year after you played 4 games. Do whatever the hell you want to do. But Akron, oh, no. Your academics weren't good enough. No bowl games for you. Okay, that would be like somebody punishing me by saying, Andy, you are a bad boy and you can't play in the NBA. I don't know what kind of year Akron's going to have this year, but the Boca Raton Bowl, not for you. Your athletes' grades weren't good enough. Well, what about all these other schools where players play at 4 different schools or 5 different schools? What about them? Oh, no. We're focused on Akron. And Akron, your academic progress rate is bad. Bad. Orioles preview coming up next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.